Hello and welcome to the IFT show. I'm Elaine Watson reporting for FoodNavigator-USA. Now, a few months ago, the FDA sent some shockwaves through the industry by proposing a crackdown on trans fats. What they proposed is to revoke the GRAS status of partially hydrogenated oils, which is a big source of artificial trans fats. Now, of course, on the face of it, this would seem like a bit of a no-brainer. After all, trans fats are bad news. However, the devil is in the detail, as always with these proposals, and not everybody is happy with what's on the table. Now, one group that's quite unhappy with the proposal is the American Bakers Association. Now, here to join me is Lee Sanders, who heads up regulatory affairs at the association. So, Lee, could you talk through what your concerns are about this proposal?
Yes, Elaine, thank you very much. That's a great question. And actually, the first problem is that it's not a proposal at all.
Right.
It's a tentative determination notice, or what the agency should have done is had all their information gathered to make that determination. But instead, they asked questions to gather that information. What the American Bakers Association thinks would be appropriate would be for them to withdraw the tentative determination and then re-propose as a rulemaking. So then they'd have to go through the correct steps. They'd have to do an impact analysis on what it means for small businesses, which is a really big issue. And then also they'd have to do an environmental impact analysis. So they'd have to have all the data and the science, the rationale to back up that proposed rulemaking.
But from a technical perspective, why can't you just get rid of partially hydrogenated oils? A lot of companies have been working on this for several years. You know, are they just dragging their heels, or are there real technical issues to overcome still here?
The baking industry, as well as the food industry overall, has been working on this for about a decade. And I would say really that a lot of the reformulation has been done, and those that are left are the few really hard to reformulate products. Everyone, of course, wants to have the healthiest profile because that's what customers are seeking. And so the thing that's needed is additional time. Right now, there are oil manufacturers and seed manufacturers that have developed some good products. Those are still in the development stage. Once those are developed, then they have to have a proper amount of testing for different applications. You have to make sure that there's enough in the supply chain to meet demands and then get it into the marketplace. And really, realistically, that's going to take a minimum of 3 years, maybe 5, even closer to 10 years. And the reason I say 10 years is because for some of these products, especially that are produced by small manufacturers, they don't have in-house R&D facilities, and so they have to go outside, and that's costly. And so the reformulation for the small companies, it will take a longer time.
Getting down to the real specifics here though, can you talk about particular applications or ingredients? We talked about unintended consequences in your comments to the agency.
Yes, and that's a big issue because that's something that when they looked at the tentative determination they weren't aware of. Our association led a group that went in just recently to meet with the Office of Management and Budget to share the same information we shared with FDA earlier this year. And the fact is that there are uses that FDA wasn't aware of. For example, mono and diglycerides, use of emulsifiers, coatings for spices, colors, flavors, and then sprinkles, of course.
So things that would introduce a fairly negligible or trace amount.
That's correct. So, it wouldn't really have an impact on the health.
Yes.
By pulling those things, but there's no good alternative right now for those things.
Yeah. Okay, so some of the solutions that people have suggested in their comments are in relation to labelling. So can you talk about some other options there that perhaps could be considered by the agency?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you look at some of the other recommendations that we see globally, the World Health Organization and the Government of Canada, for example, have come up with recommendations for 0.2 as a labeling threshold rather than 0.5. And that's something that really targeted trans fat, to get trans fat out of the diet, not necessarily partially hydrogenated oils.
So to clarify, in the US at the moment, if you've got less than 0.5 grams per serving, you can make a zero declaration.
That's correct. So an alternative could be to move that down, to further encourage, innovation and to move people out.
I mean, obviously we don't know what will happen, but if the FDA does decide to go ahead with this, regardless of some concerns raised by yourselves and other organisations, what is a realistic time period for a phase out? I mean, you've talked about 10 years, and some people say we could do this tomorrow.
Well, I think it could be a rolling implementation, and I think the smaller companies are the ones that are going to need more time to reformulate. You could do it today, but you're going to force people back into saturated fats. And is that really a healthier alternative? You know, your options there are lard in some cases, palm oil, coconut oil. Those things aren't necessarily sustainable. Are using those things an issue for the environment? And so I think what we all want to do is come up with healthier profile alternatives that are sustainable. And so that takes more time because those are in development right now.
Sure. Well, it'll be fascinating to see how this plays out. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Elaine Watson reporting for Food Navigator USA.